Hi, I'm Cherie Hartwick and I'm here for Stay Creative at OPC. Some of you might know me. I teach a lot of classes here when we're open, and today I'm going to give you a taste of Zentangle. It's a meditative art form, and don't be scared off by the word art form because it's really art for the non-artist. The way it was created and the theory behind it is anybody can do this. And I'll explain a little bit about that as we do things. And I think you'll enjoy it, especially in this time when we're all stuck in the house and we're not supposed to go out. It focuses you, but it also relaxes you, and it can be very, very good for you. Zentangle is it doesn't take many supplies. And I know some of you who have been in home through this whole thing haven't been out. You don't have to go to the art store. All you need is a piece of paper, a pencil, some kind of a fine point pen, and possibly a Q-tip. Now I'm going to show you what I'm using. Today I'm going to be using this square of paper. We call it a tile. This one is a little bit big, so you can see it easier. This is 4.5 inches. Normally, what we work on is a size, this size, which is 3.5 inches. But I thought for better visual, we'll work on a little bit bigger. But just to show you what you can use, this is a sketchbook. If you have one of these around with a few blank pages in it, that would be good. If you don't have anything like that, if you have copy paper, from your computer, that would work. Or even if the worst comes to worst, this is just a lined tablet, you could work on that. Any kind of paper, cardstock, index cards, anything will work. A regular number 2 pencil, this is one that's been cut in half, or it might be a golf pencil. Like I said, if you have Q-tips around, that would be good. What we use is this, which is called a tortillon or a blending stump, and this is a nice clean one. This is what happens when you use one a lot, and I'll show you how to use that in a few minutes. The other thing you need is some kind of a pen. If you don't have a black pen, you could use a blue or even a colored one. This is the one I'm going to be using today, and this brand comes in a lot of different sizes. Normally, this is the size I use, or up to this size. Now, for better visual, the broader one is better. And I'm going to show you these. This is one done with just an extra fine Sharpie marker. So if you even have one of those around, it would work. So I'm going to cap up my pens first of all. That's an important thing to do. Keep them from drying out. And the first thing you're going to do is use a pencil. And we don't use pencils very much in this whole thing. There is a ceremony to doing Zentangle. And one of the first things you do is appreciate the supplies that you have. Appreciate that you're healthy enough to be sitting somewhere at home and actually participating in this. The second thing you do is you draw a dot in each corner of your paper. If you're drawing on a big blank piece of paper, draw a square about the size that I'm using, about 4 inches. It could be bigger. It could be smaller, and it doesn't have to be a perfect square either. And to figure out how far in your dot should be, I use like a pencil width and just put a dot in each corner. And what this is going to do is give you a border, because the next thing you do is draw a line between those dots, and it doesn't have to be perfectly straight. As you can see, mine is not perfectly straight. And you also can turn your paper or your book around as needed. This gives you a place to do your drawing. Now, Zentangle, the word tangle, we're making tangles today. And the reason this is called art for the non-artist is because to be a tangle or a design, whoever creates a design has to be able to deconstruct it into steps that anybody can follow and make that particular design. Most of the designs are based on 4, 5 different things. One is a dot. The second one is a straight line, a C shape, an S shape, and a circle. Most of the things that we're going to be learning how to do today are based on those 5 marks. The reason they developed this like this, using a small piece of paper and a pencil and a pen, is they wanted it to be affordable for one thing, and they also wanted it to be transportable. You can easily carry this around in a purse or a bag wherever you go. Now, for ease of instruction today, I'm going to divide this into sections. That's called the string, and I'll explain that a little bit more in a few minutes. The one I'm going to use today is just a Z for Zentangle, and I'm going to just draw a line over this way, and then I'm going to go back over to this line, and then I'm going to come back down here. That's going to be my divisions. I'm going to show you how to draw 4 different tangles today. And they're one's a little bit complicated, but the other 4 are very, very simple. And just by learning how to do these 4 and doing them in different ways, you can be creative more than you can even imagine. All these tangles have names. Now the names, some I remember, some I don't. Some have meaning. Some have no meaning to me whatsoever. But so we're just going to start with a very simple one. This one is called Tipple, and I don't know why it's called Tipple, and all it is circles. And the trick with drawing this one is to make your circles different sizes, and you don't want them real tiny because you'll be forever filling up the space. I'm going to fill up this whole triangular space with these circles. So I'm just going to randomly draw a few circles. And the whole idea of Zentangle is to focus on what you're doing. Every line that you draw, every circle that you draw, focus on what it is you're doing. Now I'm going to draw some more circles. To make sure that these circles touch, I'm going to start my next circle on the circle I already have. And the border is going to sort of keep us contained, but it doesn't really have to keep us contained. I could draw a circle right here and have it go outside that border. But the other important thing to know about Zentangle, first, there's no mistakes. Secondly, we don't use rulers, and we don't use erasers. Don't let that scare you, because you don't really need one. So I'm just drawing circles now to fill in between these big circles that I drew on there, and I might draw another big one over here, draw a couple little ones. But you see, if you start on a circle you already have, you end up with them touching. Now, I'm not going to worry about it filling in that border completely. So I'm just going to fill these in just like that. And so you see, I don't get started doing little teeny ones. You can put some little teeny ones in there, but don't get tied into that. So now I'm going to bring some more over to this line here. And I'll do another big one, a smaller one, and you just make them fit wherever they'll fit, just like that. Now the other thing about Zentangle is you move the paper around. Now it's going to be hard for me to come over here and draw these circles over here. So I'm just going to turn my paper however it's easiest for me to use it. And now I can draw some more circles. Now see, that one wasn't perfect, but I'm not going to worry about that. And some people say, oh, my hand is so shaky. Well, if your hands are shaky all through what you're doing, you'll be surprised at how neat it's going to turn out. You won't even notice it. Now I'm going to draw another big one here, a couple little ones here, just to fill it in. Okay, that's pretty well filled in. I'm going to cap up my pen. Now we're going to use the pencil again. And you can try to shade as you go along, or you can come back and shade at the end. But to shade these, all you're going to do is like trace around the circle that you just drew. Just inside, just a little bit. And you can see I'm kind of doing it scribbly. It doesn't really matter. But you do want to get a little circle on every single little one. Now you can see why I said don't make them real tiny, because you'll be here forever doing this. And don't worry if your pencil is not real sharp and pointy. In fact, it's good to have a point on it sometimes, but it's almost better to have a flat side. And you can do that by taking a scrap piece of paper and just rubbing it on one side till it gets kind of like a flattened edge. So I'm just about done. Now, I'm going to use this tortillon or blending stump, and if you don't have one, don't worry. You could use a Q-tip, you could use a piece of tissue, you could actually use your fingertip. It gets kind of messy when you do that, but what it does is it evens out the graphite that you just put down, and when you've used it enough, like the tip of this one that's black from graphite, sometimes you can use it without even adding more. So I'm just going to retrace what I did and come in just a little bit. You want to leave the white center, but see how that makes that look nice and round? And some of these that are real tiny, you just give them just a little swish around like that, just to soften that pencil mark. And sometimes they'll get completely coated. See, that one I didn't even put around it, but it shaded it with the graphite that was on my tortillon. Now you'll see how different this looks once I get my hand out of the way. There. Now see how it looks like little pebbles or something there? Now, in a normal class when I teach it, I try to have flute music playing in the background to relax you and entertain you while you're doing this, but we don't have that today. So, now we've done Tipple. And normally, when I teach a class, I have something called a step out that I would give you. And what it is the steps on how to do a particular design. You can see from this one, usually on step outs, if there's any color, it'll show you the first step in red. Then on the next step, it'll show you that step in black, and then the additional steps in red until you get to the end, which shows you how to complete the whole design. And these come in different forms. This is one I did, and I'll show it to you again when we do another pattern that's off this sheet. It can also be on a bigger sheet. And if you go onto Pinterest at all, you will see these in a lot of different forms. This is another way. It's just a bigger format. And again, it's showing the steps. This one is not in color, so you just have to see, step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. And we are going to be doing this pattern in a few minutes. Okay, so now we'll move on to another kind of a tangle. See, this one we use the circle or the orb. Now we're going to use some straight lines. And don't let straight lines scare you. I'm going to turn this again so it's easier for me to draw. And normally we don't draw in these strings in ink, but I'm going to do it in this one because this one is called a grid pattern. And this is going to be one line of my grid. Now, the grid is going to be in this triangle. When I draw a grid like that, I'm going to draw this line in too. To make sure it's kind of evenly spaced, I'm just eyeballing that this is the middle right there. So I'm going to divide that space in half and draw a line this way. Now I'm going to divide each of these halves in half. And if you just pull the pen down towards you, it's not perfectly even, and it doesn't really matter. So now I'm going to turn it back this way, and I'm going to draw this line in because we need that as part of our grid. now I have this, I want to make this into squares. So now I'm just going to kind of eyeball it this width here and draw a line down and down. Like I say, they don't have to be perfectly even. In fact, in some instances, you can make it narrow at one side to give it more movement. And if I can find an example of that in my things I have here, I'll show you. But I'm just dividing this into squares. Now, some of them you'll notice are not finished because I went right to this other string line and stopped because another pattern is going to go into that space. So now this pattern is called floors. This one I can remember and I know how it got its name. The founders of this, gentleman and a lady, Maria Thomas and Rick Richards, I think his last name is, they developed this, and they developed a lot of patterns, and other people develop tangles too. But this one, it looked like their tile floor in their bathroom. That's why they named it floors, but it's F-L-O-R-Z. And to do this one, actually I'm going to turn it this way so it's a little bit easier for me to draw it. All you're going to do is wherever these lines intersect, you're going to draw a little diamond shape, just like that. And then you're going to fill it in. This is where sometimes a broader tip pen will work better. And so in every one of these, you're going to fill in with this little diamond shape. And it works easier if you work in a row, either across or down, whichever works for you. But on these edges, it's not a whole design. So you're just going to draw a half of a diamond shape. And up here it's a half of a diamond shape this way. And actually in this corner it would be a quarter of a diamond shape. And you can work from right to left, up or down, whichever way you want. And this is the part where what they recommend is that you focus, anytime you're doing anything like this, you focus on every line that you draw. And what it does is it takes your mind off of other problems. They suggest doing this like just before bedtime. And it clears your mind and you get a better night's sleep. I think we should all try that in this situation that we're in now. So I'm just putting these little diamond shapes in, and this is another case where you don't want these lines real close together and real small because you'd be forever drawing these. I mean, it's pretty, and you can do it if you want. I have one lady who has taken my classes here at OPC, and she draws very, very tiny, and her pieces are beautiful. And if that's what she likes doing and likes how to do it, that's fine. There are no mistakes in Zentangle. If you find that all of a sudden you did something that you think is a mistake, we call it an oops, which means occasional opportunity presented suddenly. The opportunity is you can just go in a different direction with whatever you were doing. So there I have, oops, except for one corner up here, I have to do my little thing there. I have all my diamond shapes in. So now I'm capping up my pen. Now I'm going to take my pencil again. Now there's different ways that you can shade this one, and there's also other things you could do. You could actually come in and draw another square inside each square, or you could draw a circle inside that square. What I like to do with this is shade just one side. I have to turn it back my original way to see how I did it. Okay, I like just doing like one corner. And again, I'm just kind of scribbling. I'm not doing it real dark, and I'm not trying to fill in the whole thing. So I'm just scribbling. And you do it on each one. See, the fact that we don't use erasers you know, I usually tell my students, you don't use erasers in my classes, but if you go home and you happen to find an eraser and there's something that really offends you, you can, you know, you're welcome to erase it. It's one of those things, you know, once you know the rules, although there are not really rules to Zentangle, then you can break the rules, because there's other ways of drawing these tangles without doing the border. But for somebody who has never done this before, it's a good way to start. So I'm almost done. And like I say, these ones that tend to go under this line, you just kind of pretend that the rest of it is there, even though you don't see it, to get your shading in. Okay. All right. Now, again, I'm going to come in with the tortillon and just go over, and you can see how nice it smooths out the graphite, and you just carry it a little bit further. And the funny thing about this, like they say, you're really supposed to take your time. It's the journey that counts in this art form, not the destination. So if you're the type of person that you have to know how this is going to look and end up when you're all done, you're not going to enjoy this. The idea of this is to just go with the flow, see where it takes you, and I think you'll be amazed. My like I say, I have a degree in art education from Purdue University, and but I don't like to paint, and I don't really like to draw. And my daughter, who is a musician, a professional musician, her claim to fame was always that she couldn't even draw stick figures. Well, when I first learned how to do this at a class, I taught her how to do it, and she was hooked almost immediately. And then 3 years after we both learned how to do this, we went to become certified teachers. And you have to go all the way to Providence, Rhode Island, which is where the couple lives. And she teaches probably more classes than I do. She's doing some online classes now too. So there, that's my floors all shaded, and you see it just gives it a little bit of dimension. The thing with shading in Zentangle that's different than true art forms is that you don't worry about the light source, where it's coming from, or you know, what's shading what. You do it for emphasis, to make some things recede to the back and some things come forward, or just to give it more definition, not the true light source kind of shading. So that's 2 patterns you know now. Now I'm going to teach you a real simple one first, and we'll do the difficult one last. This third one is called mist, and you'll find it spelled M-I-S-T, or you'll find it M-S-S-T. And what I think it looks like is rain. And this is where you sort of, it isn't really the S shape, it isn't really the C shape, it's just a squiggly line. And I'm going to draw it in this area right here. And again, what I usually do so that they're sort of evenly spaced is on this line right here, I'm going to pick the middle. And all it is a squiggly, wiggly. This is for you people who say, oh, my hand is so shaky. Well, this one is perfect. And then you put some dots at the end. Then you move over a little bit and you do another one, maybe not as far down. Then you do another one. And you notice my squiggles, I'm not worrying if they're the same. It's more interesting if they're not. You just vary the length. You can vary the number of dots. You can bring it all the way down to this line. You don't have to. You just keep changing it up. And this is one thing. You try and have these sort of evenly spaced, but if you see you've made too big of a gap in one, you could always come back and put another one in between it. So I'm just going to quickly, and see that one I think is too far apart, so I'll do a little one in between. And this is a nice, I call this a filler. It fills in a space fairly quick, and you have to admit it's very easy to do. Now, shading this one is You can do it different. Now I'm just doing squiggles all the way down. Now I'm going to come back over here and fill up the rest of the way this way. This pen that I'm using, I don't know if you can really see it. It's called a PN from this company, and it has a porous tip, but it also, it tends to, the harder you press, the wider the line, and the lighter you press, the narrower the line. So you can get some different definitions just by using the same pen. Okay, so I'm going to have that be my outside line of that. Now see, if I were a real perfectionist, I would come back with an eraser and maybe erase that, but I'm not going to. I'll show you how I'm going to make that disappear. So for shading the mist, what I usually do is I just run some graphite across the top, about 1/8 of an inch or so. And then I'm also going to run it down along this line that I did. And I'm kind of rounding this corner here. The trick with graphite and the pencil, if you sharpen it to a nice sharp point, where you want the darkest shading is where you would point the point. So I'm just doing it around this edge for now, and we'll see how it looks later. Then I'm going to take my tortillon and again just blend. See, I'm filling in that border from that corner and just going around and just kind of just doing it in little circles. And the harder you press, the more it's going to pick up and move it around. And I'm just pulling it in a little bit towards the middle. There. That's how that looks. Now I might come in and do some more shading when I'm all done. So the last tangle I want to show you is called Crescent Moon. And this happens to be another one that it sort of looks like what you're talking about. We're drawing crescents. And that crescent is just a half circle. I'm turning it this way for now, so it's easier for me to draw. And you do want to try and get these about the same size, but you just don't want a huge difference in the size. You don't want an itty bitty one and then a great big one. So you can start anywhere on any of those three lines. And I'm going to start about here and make a crescent and fill in that line, and then I'm going to fill it in. And this is where Maria, when she does this on her videos, she takes joy in watching how nice and rich and black that little crescent gets by filling it in. So she just enjoys it. I've seen this done also where they don't fill in the whole crescent. They put a design in there. So I'm going to move about a 1/4 inch away and do another crescent. See, they're not exactly perfect and they're not exactly even, but nobody will notice that. Nobody's going to come up to it with a ruler and measure and say, oh my goodness, that one's about 1/16 of an inch different. So you're going to march these, and these also to me look like ladybugs. Now, if I start my crescent here, which is about the same distance as from there, I'm not going to have room to make one big enough. So this one is actually going to be in the corner. And again, turn your book or your paper or whatever you're drawing on so that it's comfortable for you to draw. And sometimes if I'm drawing this on, like I say, this is that same pattern drawn on a smaller tile with a much finer pen. If I'm drawing with a finer pen, I will come back later with a broader pen and fill those in. It saves a lot of time, but this pen nib that I'm drawing with right now is fairly thick, so we can do this easily, filling that in. And I also, the thing you think about, well, that I think about is, this is one of the smaller spaces. So I decided to put this in a smaller space so I didn't have to do quite as many of these crescents. I could have done it in any one of these. And that's where the interesting part of this comes in, because I'm showing you how to draw 4 different tangles today. And some of you might have been, you know, in my classes or done this on your own, or you can, now that you know a little bit about it, go on Pinterest or Facebook and YouTube and learn more about it. You can learn this on your own. And the more tangles you know, the more different ways you put them together, the more interesting it is. Okay, so now I'm going to start, that's about as far away as these are. So I'm going to start my next crescent right about here. You know, I haven't kept track of how long we've been doing this, but once you know a lot of tangles, you should be able to do, maybe not one quite this big. This size tile is called an apprentice tile, and they typically use this in the schools to teach the kids. And I actually use this when I have taught at some of the senior living centers, and used broader pens because, you know, it just gets, if you get too fine and too small, it's just too hard to see. And I enjoy doing it on this side with this size pen just as much. Okay, I don't know, but I think if I'm going to do another one here, but this is what's going to happen. It's going to touch that one. And sometimes these kind of things happen, and it's perfectly okay. Like I said, there's no mistakes, just opportunities. And I will explain what I'm going to do in that corner in just a minute. So the next thing we're going to do with this pattern is called an aura. There are certain phrases and different techniques that we use a lot in Zentangle. And an aura, all an aura is following the shape of something you've already drawn. So what we're going to do, I'm going to start over here. We're going to draw an aura, which means I'm going to make a line following the shape of this crescent, just a little bit of ways, just like that. That's an aura. And then I'm going to turn my card and I'm going to draw one on this. And I'm going to keep going around. And this is when you do want to try and keep them uniform as far as how far away you're drawing. But if something happens and you get further or closer, don't worry about it. Now this one, I'm going to end it right where it hits that crescent. And I'm going to pick it up again on this side and finish it. That's another technique called drawing behind, which we might do another time. So now this one, I'm going to have it go behind that one, like that. Now to finish out this little corner, because what's going to happen, I'm going to put more auras, is we're going to have a line this way, this way, this way, this way, and just finish it like that. So now I'm going to keep going around these crescents. And you can see here's another one. Now this one is going to touch here, and I just pick it up and bring it over here. Where they touch another aura, you just let it stop. And like this one, I'll just pick up this, start this aura where that one ends. And at some point, you don't have to keep moving the card, but we'll do it however it works for you. That was rather squiggly, and that's okay. So this is going to go there. If you have to move it for every stroke, that's okay too. And actually that's working better for me to move it for every stroke. So when you come to a little section like this, like I say, you just keep doing the auras until you run out of room. Now there is another way to do the inside of the crescent moon, which I won't show you now, but I will show you an example of it. And you just keep drawing those until you can't draw anymore, just like that. Now to shade Crescent Moon, you pick one side, and it doesn't matter which side, and you just shade halfway up these these auras that you made. So I'm picking this one, I'm gonna go halfway up all these auras that I made that are around that crescent. I'm gonna go halfway up around that crescent. And this one I might add a line or two. That's one thing. If you forget something, you can always go back and fix it. So this one, I'm going to go about halfway up. Depending on how big or little you do your crescent moons, sometimes it's easier to see this than others. But it's always interesting. Okay, and I just got this little guy over here. All right, now I'm going to take my tortillon again and blend this. That one doesn't go very far, but this one does. And this one, I'm going to bring it a little bit further so it goes about halfway up. And you can see how much more rounded these look. Then they don't look flat. Oops, see, I almost forgot. We have a couple more, at least one more to do, two more to do. It just gives it much more dimension. So now I have a couple other things I can do. Basically it's done. This is the way it's going to look. But I want to do something on this line and maybe this line to make it look more like it's separated from the other things. So what I'm going to do with my graphite again is I'm going to, this time I'm pressing fairly hard along this line of my floors, and I'm going to go all the way around floors. I'm sort of ignoring what I already shaded and just doing a little bit darker. This is where if I had a point on my, well, I do have a point on my pencil, I would aim it where I want the graphite to be the darkest. And I'm going to go along this side. And then with the tortillon again, just bringing it in a little bit. Softening that edge. And turning it however it's best for you to use it. There, so now that gives it, whoops, that's upside down. That gives it a little bit more emphasis, and it makes it look like it's standing sort of by itself. Now the next thing I want to show you is, well, the other thing you do, I usually when I draw this mist, I think of it as rain, so I think of it as coming down, but usually Zentangle is not really directional. You shouldn't worry about that. You decide when you look at your finished tile, which direction to you is the way you want other people to look at it. So I'm deciding that this is the direction that I want people to look at it. So then I'm going to put my initials down here so that people know when they see this, that's the bottom and this is the way I want you to look at it. Now, a couple other things that could be done that with this to make it interesting is in my tipple up here, all these little triangles that are made by the circles touching each other, you can come back with your pen and fill those in. And it makes it look different. And I'll show you one that I completed earlier, and you'll see how different it is. And sometimes you don't have a triangle because your pen just sort of naturally filled it in. But most of the time there's a little tiny triangle in there. Now along this edge, I could pretend like this is, I wouldn't do it on the outside, but along this edge, I could fill it in and fill in each little triangle. Now, a couple weeks from the time that this is going to be shown, we're going to have a Zoom get-together, and I don't know much about that, but what I'd like you to do is to practice these, try these, and we'll do like a show and tell. Have everybody show what they came up with and how they achieved their Zentangle. There, so that fills that in and gives it a little bit of weight. And I would show you next to the one I did earlier to show you the difference. This is, hopefully those are both within this screenshot. This is without filling the black in, and this is with filling the black in. And the other thing, this is basically the same string with a Z. It's just that they're just a little bit different sizes. But getting into the string more, I want to show you, this is the same 4 patterns, but it's on a different string. All this is I did a line like this and a line like that. So 2 curvy lines instead intersecting rather than a zigzag straight line. So my Crescent Moon had to fit into some curvy space. But look at how nice those crescents and the shading did on that. And the same thing with my floors. I had to, in this, the shading, you can see it really makes it look like it's going underneath the Crescent Moon. And the same thing, the Crescent Moon looks like it's going underneath where I drew the mist. And that's the fun thing of Zentangle. Now the string part, I've got a page, I don't know how good it will show up, probably not too good. But this was just playing around with different string ideas. This is doing a Z, this is just doing a loop. It can be any design you want. This is where you can kind of do a scribble and in the middle of your frame and then fill it in with your patterns. By doing that, even with only knowing 4 different patterns, it's limitless the different things you can do with Zentangle. And I think that's probably going to be it for today.